Okay, everyone. What I'd like to do, is first of all hold the mic centrally, is just talk a little bit about the concept of the Knowledge Cafe and how, if you like, I discovered it and start to use it, because it's not a new concept. It's not something that I particularly have any claim of ownership for. So I want to talk a little bit about the concept and the history, explain very briefly the process, because it's a very simple process, and then we're going to run a Knowledge Cafe. Okay? For me, the Knowledge Cafe goes back 4 or 5 years when I used to go up to London to attend a series of sort of lectures. There was one pretty much every month on a knowledge management theme, but it was a traditional presentation. The organization had a speaker. The speaker would present with PowerPoint slides for supposedly 30 minutes, and then supposedly we'd have 30 minutes for discussion. More often than not, they took the full hour. They had too many PowerPoint slides. There was no time for questions. There was no time for discussion. And the best part of the evening was the conversation that we had down the pub afterwards. And I started to realize there was a lot more knowledge in the room, more often than not, than in the so-called expert at the front of the room. And also, it was a lot more fun down the pub as well. Sometimes it was okay. Sometimes if you had a really good speaker, it was great. But probably 2 times out of 3, it was amazing the number of speakers who would just, overrun their time, and they would not be very good evenings. And I wanted to do something a little bit different. And there are lots of other factors leading into this, but eventually, I guess by reading around, thinking about what I wanted to do, the form of Knowledge Cafe that I run was born. And I started to run these Knowledge Cafes in London, I think in about September 2002. So they've been going for three and a bit years now. And the whole idea was very, very simple. I wanted to make them simple because I was borrowing and stealing rooms. I didn't necessarily have flip charts. I didn't necessarily have a slide projector. I had no control over the room. So I wanted something that would work really in any situation. And so the idea of the cafe was you still had a speaker, but they only got to speak for 10 minutes. So however boring they were, you only had to put up with them for 10 minutes. Sometimes they talk a little bit longer, but that's fine. But the basic idea was that they chose a topic, a theme. Maybe they had a strong point of view that they wanted to communicate. Maybe it was a topic that was complex, where people would have different perceptions, different views of the particular subject. They would talk for 10 minutes, and then they would pose 1 or 2 very open-ended questions around the topic. And then really the rest of the evening was then given over to discussion, given over to conversation. And basically I'd break people up into groups of 5. 5 seems to work pretty well. Take the remainder of the time, typically about an hour, give them about 30 minutes to have conversations around their individual tables, or in their individual groups, because we often might not have tables. And then bring everyone back together to have what I call a large group conversation. And we're probably all familiar with that sort of process because it's nothing new. I changed the rules just a little bit to, in some ways, sort of meet my needs, but in some ways to, at least I found, to improve the process. One of the things I said was anything that gets in the way of the conversation is actually a bad thing. So if you appoint a leader at the table, that's almost certainly a bad thing, because that leader is the one that's going to be reporting back, and they're not thinking about the conversation or joining in the conversation. They're too busy taking notes, thinking about what they're going to have to say when they come back. And if it's somebody who doesn't really want to do it, they're feeling nervous, they're not happy, they don't particularly do a good job when they're reporting back. It doesn't always work terribly well. Also, this whole idea of reporting back just seemed archaic to me. The whole idea that the person at the front of the room was the expert, was the teacher, and everyone was going to report back to the teacher, and I was going to stand there and say, yes, no, that's a good idea, and kind of add my words of wisdom. I wanted to get away from that. I wanted just to be a facilitator and simply facilitate a conversation in the room. So I said, okay, at the end, we're not going to report back. What I want to do is facilitate this large conversation in the room. you'd be surprised in some circumstances just how difficult it is. This business about reporting back is so deeply ingrained in us that some people simply can't do it. I ran a cafe in Cambridge a few months back for a bunch of, they were central banker librarians, so I guess they were maybe a little bit more conservative than most. And they insisted on reporting back to me. Every time I tried to get them to address the conversation to other people in the room, they would only talk to me. And in the end, I kind of just let go and I let them report back to me because that seemed to work. So I've kind of explained the basic idea of the cafe. It can be used in lots of different circumstances and lots of different ways. I mean, I can sometimes talk about the Knowledge Cafe and the process and how it can be used for a lot longer than I'm doing now. But the real idea now is to actually do it so you get to experience it. What I'd like to say is if you like the concept, if you like the idea, I run the cafes in London about 10 times a year. You'll find the published dates for them on my website. There were 3 lined up, one in March, one in May, April, May. So go take a look, and you're clearly all very, very welcome to come along. They're totally free. And what's tremendous as well is that for the last, is it 3 years now? London Knowledge Network here have hosted a knowledge barbecue that we've actually held in the courtyard out here in the summer, which has been absolutely, absolutely wonderful. They've been great events, haven't they, Martin?
Yeah,
yep.
I really enjoyed it. We got about 50 people here.
Yep, it's good. So I'm not too sure what we've got a plan this year, but we can we'll think about that. Yeah, okay. So what I thought I'd do now is, rather than come up with a completely new theme, so I'm doing things just a little bit differently here. What I want to say to you, at your tables, what I want you to do is to discuss and think about the day. And think and talk about what you have learnt during the day. In particular, you know, I'm sure, I hope anyway, each and every one of you has got at least one, if not several, if not many, key insights from the day. What I call actionable insights. Things that when you get back to the office, you're going to do differently. Either at a personal level or at a team level. So think about those actionable insights and share them with each other. We haven't had a chance particularly to review the outcome of the Future Backwards and the anecdote circles, but bring that into play as well. I certainly know here in our group there's some tremendous stuff that I think may well influence. In fact, you and I have got one actionable insight, haven't we? So that's good. So do that, and I'll give you about 15 minutes or so to do that at your tables. Some of you might like to get together, because it's nice to have at least 5 at a table. Three's maybe too few. So I'll give you 15 minutes. I'll then bring you back together, and we'll try to have this large group conversation for another 15 minutes before winding up just before 5. Okay? Off you go.